Hi there, I'm Nairi Eckerly, and today I'm talking about creating a base theme, the why and the how of creating one. I've done it based on my own experience creating one for the agency that I work for. So hopefully this is of help whether you're a designer or a developer or involved in the web development theming process. Okay, so a little bit about who I am. I've been working with WordPress for the last 4 years. Before that, I was doing static HTML and CSS and a lot of design. I still do a bit of design, so I've got that balance between the creative side and the technical side that WordPress coding and website development brings. I'm a travelling Kiwi, hence the accent, from New Zealand. I work in an agency called LB Design in their London office. We also have an office in Philadelphia in the US and work with small to medium businesses and charities all around the world, really. I've got my own portfolio site at designac.com that's based on WordPress and just been redesigned. And I also have a travel blog that sits on wordpress.com called kiwifootprints.com, and it's got basically travel stories and lots of photography in it. So check those out if you fancy finding out more about me afterwards. Okay, so what is this presentation all about? I'm going to be talking about what a base or client theme is. And I'm also going to talk about why you should design and code a base or client theme. I'll talk about the process I went through and talk a bit about the design side of it, and then a little bit about coding and testing. I am going to steer clear of delving into too much technical terms or jargon, so it's going to be quite an overview of everything, otherwise we'll be here all day. And I'll try and give you some examples and talk about the future. Okay, great. So getting straight into it, what is a base client theme? You may also hear me refer to it as a starter theme. They're all basically the same in terms of the wording. You may already use a starter theme, a theme that you edit or hack away at, or you may use a framework. The difference is by creating your own, it's your own code, you understand it through and through. It doesn't contain much colour and style, so later on when I show you the examples you'll see it's very rough and ready. It's very much more about the functionality and layout, flexibility, because colours, fonts and images and text can all be changed on a per project basis. In saying about the functionality, it is still bare bones functionality. Because it's a base theme, it's the sort of theme that will be built onto, or it might be rolled out for lower budget builds, very basic kind of websites. So it's whether you may use it for one or the other or for both. In this instance I've tried to use it for both, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So why design a client or base theme? Why should I do my own if there's so many others out there? I've kind of narrowed it down to about 4 different points. It saves time. If you're the sort of person that rewrites code every project, the same code, or you copy and paste it from other projects, having this client or base theme saves you from doing that. It's already set up, it's already there, it already functions perfectly. It also saves you doing responsive calculations. I know different people have different ways of dealing with responsivity. I used to do fluid designs converting pixels to percentages, but With this and with a SAS function, you can make it so that it all works perfectly fluid, can have your media queries already set up so that it takes all that time and effort working those calculations out of the equation. And you can have a basic and standard layout pre-prepared. So if you've got a basic layout that most of your clients use, whether it's 1 or 2 columns, big, left, right, small, that sort of thing, you can have that already set up. So all the hard stuff is there and you can just tweak at it. It allows for lower budget builds. Not all our clients can afford to have that glorious, fancy custom design that's taken days to do and probably weeks to build. A lot of people are just starting out and they just want something simple, basic, that gets them on the web. Doing a base or client theme in this case means that they can have something that is still clean, simple, but it's coded really well as well. It's not bloated like a lot of other starter themes. It's kept down to just what they need, and with a couple of hours it can be tweaked with colours and fonts and various other things to reflect their company. And then, because we know the code, we can build onto it in the future without too much more expense as well. It allows for us to keep the budgets for the lower budget clients down now and in the future. Having a client and base theme, you can make it so it's easy to adjust, so that when you go in, it doesn't take long. You can literally just type in a hex number and the colours have completely changed throughout the website. There's no going into every single page, re-typing in every colour and selecting different templates to do different things like that. Having it all set up with SAS variables and functions and mixins and things like that, and maybe plugins, allows it to already be in there, and we've just got to really do simple tweaks. It might be that you add in a contact form, but we already have a contact form saved from an export in Gravity Forms, and we just have to import it in. All the fields can already be set up because they're pretty standard, and bada bing, it's all there. And then comes the coding style. How many people have had clients that don't have a lot of money, so they go out and buy a theme and they come to you and want it tweaked? So if you're anything like me, you actually spend the first couple of hours figuring out what the theme does, what code does what, why there's shortcodes all the way through it, why they've done this and that. And it's not quite the style that I'd code with. It's using different practices and principles that someone else thinks is good. And that's all well and good, but it takes time. So having my own starter client theme allows me to say to those people that would otherwise buy a theme, I can say, I've got this one, why don't we use that, and I'll tweak it as you want it. Because that way I understand the code and it's much faster, it's much cleaner, and I can come back to it quite happily in the future and add on to it. Whereas if I'm adding on to someone else's code, I'm not 100% sure if what I'm going to do is going to affect something else somewhere else in the theme, that sort of thing. So I think it's really important to really understand the code that you're using, and it's a lot faster if it's your own code. Okay, getting into process. Okay, so this is a little bit of a rough and ready diagram. Basically, I start out, I'm a big sketcher. I like to sketch out mind maps and thoughts and things like that. Things that I need to consider in the process. So the planning, what it needs to include, what I'd like to use, what are do's and don'ts, that sort of thing. And then it gets into the designing stage. I might already have wireframes from the planning stage, and in the designing, I'm just fleshing those out a little bit more. Can still be sketching, or it can be on the computer. It's not too much in terms of styling. It might just be different tones of one colour, or one font, one or two fonts. It's really very basic, because the in-depth styling of the colours and the fonts and content and things, that's all going to come when the client comes along. Then you get into the coding, which is good fun, different templates and all sorts, and then you go into testing. So you're testing different browsers, different devices, and it kind of goes around and around a little bit, because as you find something that needs tweaking in the code, you code, and you go back to testing and so forth. And then at some point it leads on to updates into the future. You go back, you code, you test, you update, that sort of thing. So that's a bit about the sort of process that I've gone through in creating this base client theme. So, getting into the planning a little bit more. So I had to think about what we wanted to achieve, and made it really nice and clear for myself so that I could keep that in mind all the way through the process. I wanted to have a simple theme that was easy to change, so that I could give it to someone that didn't want to get into the code too much, and they could just tweak colour variable here and there and it would work. I wanted it to be easy to build onto, and this is a bit of a hard one, finding that balance. So it's got to be easy to change and roll out as is, but it's also got to be easy to be able to customize a great deal on top. I wanted to deal with the common base templates. So from looking at all of our other projects that we've done in the past, and looking at the common templates that we've used, where we might want to tweak things a little bit further and that sort of thing. And then from there, looking at the standard layouts and what are the consistencies going through, what sort of widgets are used where, and that sort of thing. It has to be responsive. In this day and age, there's no reason why a website can't really be responsive, in my opinion. It's just a bit of extra work, but if it's already built into this client starter base theme, it's not extra work because it's already there. Sure, it might need to be tweaked, but most of the media queries and all of the fluid calculations are already done. And I want to consider what sort of functionality should be put into plugins. Things that might want to be taken in and out of the theme that might just be easier to add and remove a plugin rather than getting into the code and cutting out bits and pieces of the functions.php file. Likewise with widgets, where I use those widgets, whether it's a sidebar or the footer, how many, and what are the common ones that are used, and do they need to be tweaked at all, that sort of thing. So there's quite a lot that I want this one starter base theme to do. So from there, I think about the wireframes. So from looking at these past websites and sitting down, I just sketch out different ratios of the theme, thinking about where the sidebar would go, where the main content would go, header and footer. So they're pretty obvious. You've got your full page, your two halves, maybe a third, maybe 2/3, or maybe it's 3/3. So it's figuring all those out and what is realistic, because we don't want to go overboard either. And not going overboard means keeping it simple. So looking at the templates, figuring out what is necessary, how simple can I keep them. I want to make it really easy to edit the code, so thinking about ways that can make editing easier. Whether it's having more advanced custom fields, or whether it's having SAS variables, whether it's having functions and mix-ins and things like that, just to make it as easy as possible moving forward. But in saying that, I also want bare bones functionality, so I want to keep the functionality really clean and simple without going overboard, because these are for low budget clients or to build onto. So there doesn't need to be a lot in there. It's just got to be enough to move forward to get those basic themes out the door. Okay, and some tools that I'm going to use. So before doing this theme, I hadn't used SAS or Git very much, but both have been really beneficial. In terms of SAS, just being able to separate out the CSS and simplify what I'm writing, being able to have variables that you can just go in and change colours and it affects the whole document, makes it so much easier. Git, even if you just use it for backups and rollbacks, I'm sure it's going to come in very handy. I haven't had a necessary time to roll back yet, but there have been many times in the past that I'm sure it would have been beneficial if I had used Git. So that's quite a good tool as well. I know we all have our own different code editors that we like, but I've been using Sublime Text 2. I think they even have Sublime Text 3 out now. But what I like is that it's got functionality like being able to select the same word throughout a document and change it all at once just by typing it in with shortcut keys and things like that. I find it to be quite a clean and simple code editor. And I use CodeKit for compiling SAS as well as reloading the browser windows just to save time. I use Browser Stack for testing different browsers and devices. Use test data, save me putting it all in myself, and tools like the developer's toolbar on the browsers and Firebug. I don't know where I'd be without those tools. And I still use Asana for notes and reminders. Even now I have an ongoing snag list of to-do items as I work on more websites using this client theme, things that could be improved or considered to make it more flexible. So those are the tools that I use. So we've done all the planning, everything's going well, and then we get into the designing. So when it comes to the designing, I'm looking at the wireframes and I'm wanting to flesh them out, wanting to make the designs as flexible as possible and also fluid and responsive. So on the left you can see I've got a wireframe. I'm adding in more detail of like where the logo is, where the breadcrumbs would go, the title, the content, maybe where widgets would go, menus, things like that. So splitting it out, it's still very rough and ready, can be sketched, just getting a little bit more detail into there, but without going too far. And then you might also look at the home page, because the home page is quite a tricky one to deal with because they can be so different. So it's thinking about the differences that you might want to allow for. And in this case, I've considered whether it's going to be a full width website, so going edge to edge of the browser window, or whether I'm going to have a maximum width on it. Or maybe it's just the header or footer that goes full width, but the content area has a maximum width. It's also worth thinking about maybe the number of rows and the number of columns that are used. And then thinking from those is how does it all move fluid to get into when it's used in a mobile or an iPad, tablet layout. So it's still a very rough and ready design, but it's getting that flow going a little bit more and a bit more detail going throughout. Okay, so probably develop the design a little bit more. It's all going well. Then we get into the tricky bit of the coding and the testing. Okay, so when it comes to the coding, I have a look at the designs, think about the different layouts, think about the different custom post types and taxonomies that might be used, the different single pages, and things like that, with all not going overboard, keeping it simple. So this is a little bit of an example. I've probably gone into too many templates there, but you can see you've got the different ratios. You've got 3 columns, 2 columns with a ratio of 1 to 1, 2 columns of 1 to 2, or 2 columns 2 to 1. I think I've even developed a 3-column one. Yeah, I said that already. And then we've got the custom post types that all use the layout of 2 to 1 of the staff, the testimonials, the FAQ, events, blog, that sort of thing. So this is very much developing kind of as much as possible without going too overboard, because I want to have all those options there that I can just take out if the client doesn't need them. Okay, and then getting into SAS partials. I'm not sure if you can read that properly, but it's a great way of splitting up your CSS so that you can easily find what you're working on. And then it compiles into one style file, which is nice and clean. You can allow for comments and page line numbers, that sort of thing if you want. So I've got a footer, a header, a layout, which is basically, I guess, the wireframing of it, how many columns go where. I've got modules, which is probably the biggest SAS file. It goes into a lot more detail, and that could even be split out to a home SCSS file as well. I've got variables, which allow for colours and fonts, and it might even have things like the gutter width, the maximum page width, that sort of thing, and also media queries. So it's nice to just have them all separated out, and they all come in a reasonable order and compile into one file. I've also got the options.scss file, and this is a file of the things that I might take away or add in. So if the client wants a staff section, the staff section is styled in the options.scss file. And I've used comments all the way through these, so it's very easy to identify them, rip it out if it's not used, or add it in if it is used. Likewise, the contact forms, the sliders, that sort of thing, they're all styled in the options SAS file. So speaking of options, making the theme more flexible, thinking about the different plugins I'm going to use, the different custom post types and taxonomies. So I might have staff, testimonials, FAQ, maybe events, or that might be a plugin, all these sorts of things. What other plugins do I use often? It might be the Yoast SEO one, might be I have a particular slider plugin or gallery, might be gravity forms, and with that I might have a form already set up that I've exported and I can just import it into any given theme, and then you've got a contact form straight away. And thinking about the widgets, where they are used and how many do I need to allow for more to be in the footer, that sort of thing. So it's having all these different options without going overboard, but you do need to think about all the common things that are used. And it's going to save you time further down the track. Okay, so that's all good when you're coding. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So you need to do testing. So this link to GitHub has some test data that you can download and just import into your theme. It's really great. It's got a range of images and content all styled differently, so you don't have to worry about testing out different H tags or lists and things like that, because it's all in there already. This is brilliant because quite often I'll find that I've been coding a site and then the client's used maybe a variable, a tag in a different way that I didn't expect, and I haven't considered it and styled for it. So this way all the test data shows just about everything that you could want, and you can figure out early on what you've considered and what you've forgotten. Browsers, as I said, I use Browser Stack. I support down to IE8. I know a lot of people probably don't anymore, but I think it's important to at least have the layout working. Can't guarantee that everyone's on the latest browser. They may have an old computer that doesn't let them update. Could be a range of things. So I like to keep it as wide open as possible for the user audience. Likewise with devices, when I code, I don't code mobile first. I may do in the future, but not just yet. When I target devices, I actually just target the sizes when my website actually doesn't flow well anymore. So I sit down in front of the computer and just move the window, and as it gets smaller, when something doesn't sit well anymore, that's when I put in a media query and I target that size. As it goes even further smaller and maybe something else needs tweaking, and that's where the media query goes. Because we've got so many different devices of sizes and so many more being created in the future, I don't think it's wise to just target specific devices or specific sizes. It's got to work with where your website breaks itself. Then when it comes to testing, it's important that you have other people involved. So I asked my colleague to use the theme with a project that he's doing, figure out what he finds easy to work with, what he doesn't, things that can be improved. Being brutally honest, because sometimes as a developer you're so heavily involved in your site that you can't look outside the box and see the real problems around it. So it's really quite handy to have other people test it. And likewise, having another very qualified developer tester is very useful as well. I'm sure a lot of us are freelancers or contractors that work on our own most of the time and don't often know whether our code is actually improving or whether there is a better way to do something. So with this theme, we had another very qualified developer look at it, and it's quite nice to know that he went through it, and from what I could see, he didn't pick up anything majorly wrong. There were definitely some things that could be improved. Simple things that I hadn't even considered, which was a bit silly, like on-queuing scripts and CSS and fonts. So it just makes the website load a lot faster and it's a lot better. So things like that was really good. And it's not the sort of thing where you can just say, oh, that's good enough. Because this base starter theme is going to be used for so many websites moving forward, you've really got to be picky. While I said keep it simple, you've got to keep it simple, but simple in a good way. So it's got to be smooth working. And as you find maybe updates in different plugins, you need to retest it and make sure it's still working well, thinking of ways it could be improved and moving forward into the future. Maybe clients start to want something new. So you've got to really be picky moving forward. Okay, so I'm going to get into a few examples really briefly. Just remember there's next to no design involved in this. It's purely placement, and it's all about just getting it up, getting the different options available there. So this is the home page. You can see it allows for a slider, full width or full width at a maximum width. Allows for 2 columns, it allows for 3 columns, it allows for posts on the home page, images, but these are all optional, so you can remove them easily enough. It allows for widgets in the footer, social media, favicons, logos, all that sort of thing. Getting into the different kind of templates, you can allow for, in this case it's a 3-column one. It allows for sub-navigation in both drop-downs and in the sidebar. Allows for a form in the sidebar, search box, recent posts. Like, these are all just options. Like, any site that has all of this is probably way too busy, but it's just making sure that the different elements work in these places. Okay, this is like the default page layout, so it's 1 column wide, and it's making sure it works with things like images, making sure that the spacing around the images is appropriate and things like that. This is another template. It's a ratio 1:1. I don't think we actually use this one very often, but it's there in case it needs to be. And between all these templates, it's not a lot of extra code, because it's basically just changing a number in the width of the columns. So the layout might be 8 columns wide, and I just change that number within the SAS file to be 8, and the calculation works out what the responsive fluid width is. But that's getting a little bit too technical. So getting into more things, things like FAQ, thinking about the different possibilities. They might want just a list, or they may want to click through to a more detailed FAQ. So it's allowing for both. In terms of the staff section, allowing for images, allowing for more contact details, location, phone numbers, emails, allowing for the option to click through, all these sorts of things. But they're all optional, so if the user doesn't insert an image, it still sits nicely. So like the testimonials. So this allows for images if the user wants to, but they don't have to. Okay, so it's all coded up. It's all testing, it's all working great. So now we should be able to sleep and relax. But we've got the future to think about. As I've mentioned a little bit all the way through, in terms of this theme, I want to keep it as easy to edit as possible. So the easier it is for the developer and the client, the better. It's keep thinking about what works and what doesn't work. So it may not just be today, it may be a month from today, it could be a year from today. Things change, and you've got to keep an eye on how you feel about the functionality behind the theme. Thinking about homepage templates, at the moment I've got it set up so you've got the different numbers of columns in the different rows, and you can just duplicate them or remove them. But I'd like to think about how to kind of get the homepage a bit more flexible without having to do too much more coding in the back end on a website by website basis. So that's something to think about. And I still want to allow for custom design. So you can go overboard, and to some extent maybe I've still done too much, because I still want to from here be able to do a completely custom design without having to rip out too much. So it's really finding that balance between how far can a basic theme be and how far should you begin from for a custom build. Might be that I need two separate ones. And there's loads of other things to think about, but as I say, they're all in my snag list coming away as I go. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to my presentation. This presentation was given to a group of WordPress developers, designers and users at WordCamp Bournemouth in July of 2014. If you'd like to connect with me, I'm on Twitter at NairiAculi. I've got my website designac.com, my travel blog called kiwifootprints.com, and I work at a company called LB Design, and they're online at lbdesign.tv. So all my contact details are there. If you want to get in touch, feel free to flick me an email or a tweet or something. Okay, thank you for your time, and I hope this has been useful.